Now that we've created or scaffolded a new project with Vue CLI, let's look around inside our project and see what we have. We can open up our project in whatever code editor we want. In our case, we're going to use PHP Storm. Despite its name, PHP Storm is well suited for working with JavaScript code, but you can of course use any editor that you like. Once we have our project open, the key files we'll want to look at are the source directory, which contains all of our Vue.js components, the index.html file, which contains the markup that will feed to the browser, the package.json file, which tells npm what our project's dependencies are, and the webpack config file, which tells Webpack how to bundle our files for consumption by the browser. Despite having installed Vue CLI in the last video and using it to create all of these project files, we still haven't installed our project's dependencies yet. We'll do this by going back over to our terminal, making sure that we're in our project directory, and issuing the npm install command. Okay, and once this is done, we can go back to our code editor, and we'll notice that that added a new directory here to our project called node modules. If you're feeling extra brave, you can open that up and look in there, but we're not going to focus on that. The point is that we have in fact installed our dependencies and they exist in the node modules folder. Let's start out with likely the most intuitive starting point, and that is our index.html file. This is about as basic as an HTML file can get, and I do notice right away that my project name needs its proper capitalization. And beyond that, we can see that we have a div with an ID of app, and we have a script tag, which is loading a JavaScript file, which as we can see doesn't exist yet. Don't worry that that doesn't exist yet, we'll get there soon enough. Next, in our source folder, let's look at our main.js file. This is also a small file, but it's a little more cryptic as far as its meaning. These import statements at the top are leveraging something called ES6 modules. The Vue variable here is being imported from our node modules actually, and our app variable here is coming from the same directory as our current file, and it's looking into a file called app.vue, which is right here. Now the other thing we're doing here is creating a new Vue instance, and this instance will represent our entire app as a whole. We're telling it to look for an element with an ID of app, which if you remember from our HTML file is this div here. And that's our way of saying, hey Vue, insert my app contents into this particular div. Next we have our app.vue file. This is essentially sample content that Vue CLI created for us just to get us started. Soon we're going to be deleting almost everything in this file, but for now we'll look at what's in here and try to make some sense of it. A Vue component file like this one can best be understood by breaking it into three parts. We have our template area, which is our HTML. We have our JavaScript area, which defines our component and determines how it will behave. And we have the style area, which of course determines which styles will be applied to our app. Now this all may look odd if you're used to separating your HTML, your JavaScript, and your CSS into their own separate files. But this manner of combining content from three different languages into a single .vue file is very effective in writing modular encapsulated code. This means we can have our functionality broken into small pieces or components, each tucked away into its own file, along with everything it needs right there in one place. While we're not going to tackle every detail of our Webpack config file, We will look at some key parts of it. First, we'll note that Webpack is going to look at our main.js file as its entry point, and it will output our app's code into a directory called dist and a file called build.js. Next, we'll see that Webpack is going to look through all of our project files and find any files that end in .vue, and we'll use something called Vue loader to process those files. Now, of course, app.vue is one example of these that we've seen, and what this means is that Webpack will take that template HTML, the JavaScript, and the CSS code and combine or bundle them all in a way that the browser can understand. Webpack will also find all of our .js files, and we'll use something called Babel loader to process those into browser-friendly JavaScript code. Finally, let's head over to our package.json file. If you remember from the last video, Vue CLI asked us some questions when we scaffolded our project, and that's why we have some of these values filled in here by default. At the bottom of the file is where we tell Node.js what all of our dependencies are for our project. This is something that Vue CLI put in place for us so that we don't have to type all of these dependencies in ourselves. We can also see that Vue CLI added 2 scripts to our package.json file, and these are command line commands that we can run. One of them will run our dev process, and the other will run our build or production process. To run any of these scripts, what we need to do is issue the npm run command from within our project directory, and also tell it the name of the script to run. So in our case, we're going to go to our terminal, make sure that we're in our project directory, and we'll say npm run. And since we want to run the dev script, we'll say npm run dev. Okay, so what just happened there? Well, first notice that our browser popped open, and this is because Webpack has booted up a server for us and is now listening for our changes. One great thing about the Webpack server is that it has live reload, so let's see that in action. If we scroll our window down to where we can see both our editor and our browser at the same time, we can watch the live reload at work. Let's change just this word here from, let's say, essential links to awesome links. And if we look down here, as soon as we save our file, the browser updates immediately. So that's pretty cool. It definitely saves us a lot of time having to refresh the page over and over. And not only will that work for our HTML, it will also work for our JavaScript and for our styles. So we can pretty much change anything we want and then look right over in the browser and see our changes take effect immediately. So to see one other thing in action here, let's just change a color. Let's say orange here. And there we go. Another interesting thing about our Webpack dev server is that if we look in our index.html file, you'll recall there was supposed to be a folder called dist and a file called build.js, but we don't have those in our project here. Nonetheless, if we view the source code of our HTML page, we'll see that it links to this location, and if we click there, we'll even see that there is some content there. And that's part of what Webpack's dev server is doing for us. If we do actually want to get the dist folder, what we can do is go back to our terminal, hit Control-C to cancel the current process, and then we can say npm run build. And that actually does create a folder for us here called dist, and we get our build.js file. So the build script, as opposed to the dev script, is what you would want to run if you were sending your code to production. And that's about all the mileage we're going to get out of the default Vue CLI content. So we're going to go ahead, select all of these styles, and delete them. And for the JavaScript part, we'll leave this message here, but we'll change it to an empty string. And we'll leave the name of our component as app. That works for now. And up here, we're just going to select everything. Let's actually leave this div, but delete everything inside. And that looks great. Once we hit save, we'll notice that our browser goes blank. And of course, that's because we removed all of our HTML from our template. One last thing we want to do here before moving on is to locate the source assets folder. And this contains a logo that Vue.js put in place for us. And we just want to remove that whole folder because we're not going to have a need for that. So now we're ready to start putting our own code in here and building out our own component.